USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
Jerome S. Kaplan, U.S. Army, 05248-617, First Lieutenant, drafted September 1965, Vietnam, May of 67 to May of 68. My MOS, I was classified in the Quartermaster Co as a wholesaler, but it qualified me to run a petroleum laboratory, which is what I did in Vietnam. Okay, this one has a couple of my units on it. I was basically this, we called it the Leaning Shithouse. That's first log, based out of Saigon, and it had all the logistical commands. And this is the Americal Division pin that technically I was never a part of Americal, but I was there in support of Americal. And this one is my actual 262nd Quartermaster Battalion, which I had forever. But they are still in existence as a training unit now for water and petroleum in Fort Lee, Virginia. I like this hat because it cost me $1 maybe, and I think I bought it in Way. And it's the hat of the NVA, North Vietnamese Army. And this is, I wore this a lot. All on my latest motorbike trip in 23, and I wore it a lot in 2014 when I bought it. I know it's the enemy's hat, but I don't give a good rat's ass, as we would say. You know, they're not my enemies anymore. And then this other one I showed you, you know, this is just a present from the daughter, dysfunctional veterans, kind of cute. Leave me alone.
I like it.
And a lot of us feel that way, you know. I'm not always this talkative, but you're bringing it out in me. But a lot of times I'll clam up. I have nothing to say for days at a time. My Uncle Paul, who was a World War II veteran, got into deep trouble psychologically. Uncle Paul served in World War II, and he was in the Pacific Theater on the Philippines. And his unit set the record for the number of continuous days firing in the Philippines. And Uncle Paul started getting further and further out, and then the family stepped in with psychologists and electroshock. One thing led to another, and he became a ward of the Veterans Administration at the Waukegan VA hospital, which at that time was a hellhole. This lasted from like the late 50s to the middle 70s, when he was finally allowed to live semi-independently and then fully independently in the 80s. He still needed a lot of medication, but he was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. I think the root causes were all the war. I grew up in the west side of Chicago and then the north side of Chicago, and predominantly Jewish area. My father was a distributor for Vienna sausage, which was kosher and kosher-style meat. When I graduated high school, I just wanted to have a good time, and I was basically a car-crazy wise guy. We were already set to go car racing with my friend was able to, he purchased this super stock Plymouth. I really had no interest in college. I very quickly stopped going to classes at the University of Illinois in Navy Pier. Then I transferred to a junior college, and I couldn't see any reason to stay there. I just wanted to go to work and have some money in my pocket and go racing on the weekends. I knew Vietnam was going on, but I couldn't even point to Vietnam on a map. What's going on? You know, all these commies are taking over the world. What are you telling me? Till the draft board came and got me. And very quickly tried to get married. Shortly after I got my draft notice, Lyndon Johnson came on the radio and announced no more deferments for married men. So I got drafted and proposed and wound up getting married and then sent to Vietnam, all in a very short order of time. So I report to the induction center in September 1965, and all the bigger guys closer to 6 foot and above were selected by Marine recruiters. Fortunately, I made myself real small and stayed in the Army. But then I was given a ticket to a Pullman train sleeper car, and I had my own sexy little sleeper compartment. It would be perfect for honeymooners, and it rolled all the way to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where we were falling out and hustled into line and yelled at and got our hair clipped, got our vaccinations in both arms, and assigned to a basic training company where I enjoyed 8 weeks of playing at being a scout, learning the manual of arms, a lot of physical training, and rifle shooting, classwork, and all that. I'll never forget the bivouac when the drill sergeant got us out of bed at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning in a Kentucky woods somewhere and pulled the stakes out of our pup tent, and we had to crawl out into the snow. So then I was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for advanced infantry training, AIT. AIT was very good, and I graduated that, and then was put on orders to a combat unit in Vietnam, and I was told at the last moment that I had qualified for Officers Candidate School. In Officers Candidate School, they called me the Jewish John Wayne, or
that's great,
or candidate Matzah ball. I have a lazy left eye. They told me I could not be a combat officer, but I could be quartermaster transportation or a signal. And I said, go to Vietnam as a grunt, cannon fodder, or crawl for a while and become an officer. So I chose OCS. That was my first unit in Cameron, which was full of tedium, boredom, too much drinking, too much chicken shit, and breaking starch and shining shoes, and like being stateside in a war zone. This is a shot of the permanent lab at Cameron. It was in a big Quonset hut. It filled the whole Quonset. This is the interior, and here I am by it's called a COT engine. It's a octane rating engine. That's in the permanent lab. These Polaroids are the originals out of the camera from, what is it now, 55 years ago? And I was very fortunate to be selected to take this group of enlisted men and our 5-ton, deuce and a half, 3/4 ton, a Jeep, a generator set, and the big mobile laboratory. It must have been a 28, 30-foot trailer, and it was all airlifted up to Chu Lai. Here it is all getting loaded in Cameron on its way to Chu Lai. We took a C-124 Globemaster and a smaller flying boxcar, a C-123, and I rode with the equipment on that aircraft, and that thing was the leakiest, vibrating, it was dripping fluid the whole way there, and noisy, rumbling, but we made it. When this is the back of my mobile lab, and that was my crew and myself. And this is the interior of the mobile lab. You know, it was built like a ship, where we were part of the in support of Americal, who was up there relieving the Marines at that time, who were in place far too long and getting dispirited, worn out, low morale, because, you know, they were fighting, going on these patrols, taking hills, walking away from the hill, only having to come back and retake it, you know, and the Marines were suffering. But we had to keep the patrol. Everybody needed petroleum. Didn't matter if you were Navy, Army, or Marines, or Air Force, you know, we all depended on the go juice. So our biggest job was analyzing the incoming refined products that arrived mostly on large shell tankers, T2s and T5s. We'd have to draw a sample out of each hold, rush it back to the laboratory, and analyze it through the night and make sure it all met mil spec, and before they could even begin to discharge. If there were any delays, the shipping company was entitled to charge, it's called demurrage, the time they have to wait to unload beyond the regular scheduled period, and demurrage charges can be quite high. So we were always under the gun to rush our analysis and get it done, but we had to do it right. And this is typical of the shell tankers that we went aboard to sample all the holds. And this is the crew. The crews they knew me, you know, they'd go back and forth to the Persian Gulf. they'd bring me boxes of chocolates because it was all in everybody's best interest to turn those ships around real fast. And then on top of that, we had to maintain quality control and quality surveillance standards all throughout I Corps. And so I traveled a lot to other little bases. I'd fly out to Pleiku or Dalat, or so that was another component of our job. And that's me and my bunkmate Bill Huff, who I'd love to find, but he's evaded every one of my searches. I don't know if he's dead or alive. That's in Saigon together. And then we had one major incident when I was there. A GI made a big, actually, excuse me, it was a Marine refueler. He made a big mistake and refueled it was like an early AWACS. It was a Lockheed Super Constellation. Well, he filled that puppy up with JP4. And it had enough avgas in the lines, you know, it's a piston engine, it won't run on jet fuel. It had enough fuel in the lines and the carburetors and everything to fire up and check out and roll out onto the runway and, you know, push the throttles forward. And fortunately, it didn't catch on fire and burn up. They just barely had enough room to bring it to a safe stop on the runway. But after that, we had to test every fuel tank in every aircraft in Chu Lai, and then go out to all the other stations, and then, you know, do refresher courses with all the petroleum people to make sure that the aircraft were fueled properly. But all that was kind of concentrated close to the center of Chu Lai. There was a surgical hospital. I called it Second Surgical. I guess it had another name as evacuation hospital. Regardless, you know, we could see the mass casualties coming in frequently, getting choppered in, dropped off, and we could see the bigger transport planes loading them, litters, going out to Japan, Philippines, or sometimes even back to the States for further treatment. If they could patch them up, fix them up, they'd return them to duty. If not, you know, they'd you know, wind up in recovery and then get mustered out of the Army. You know, so I saw a lot of that. I was at Second Surgical quite a bit. One time I went out to the hospital ship. The Hope was stationed offshore, and I went on board for laboratory equipment. That was an eye-opener to be around the surgical hospital. And other than that, my duty in Chu Lai was actually great, because I was messing with the Seabees and eating off of linen with silverware, and we had wonderful Philippine cooks, and I was berthing in the Navy tank farm in a nice little hooch with a Navy ensign, my Mama-san, who took care of both of us, and she liked me. Her husband was a soldier in Arvin, Army Republic of Vietnam. She lived in a refugee village off the base, and I wasn't supposed to go, but she took me to a lovely duck dinner with her children and her parents. And this is me after work on the South China Sea. Yeah, I had my own Jeep, running around in a bathing suit and flip-flops. We had this rubber lady, these air mattresses that we could paddle out through the surf in the South China Sea. One time the water beneath me turned dark gray, and a beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. And I said, what the hell is that? And I looked carefully into the water, and it was a school of sea snakes swimming right under my raft. And, oh my gosh. But I made myself real small and got on the boat and stayed there until they were gone. And so it was good duty in Chu Lai until the TET Offensive.
This day in Army history, January 30th, 1968. The TET Offensive began in Vietnam. During the annual 36-hour holiday truce observing the Tet Lunar New Year, North Vietnamese forces and the Viet Cong launched attacks throughout South Vietnam.
Yeah, well, all hell broke loose on the evening of the New Year, January 1968. I had just gotten off being duty officer, and I'd heard all the chatter on the radios, and I got back to my hooch, and I was dog tired. I'd just been up for 24 hours with the duty. And I collapsed in my bunk, and like 2 hours later, wham, 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 incoming, and you're out. You learn to sleep with your fatigue trousers rolled down around your boots like a fireman, and you just jump off into your boots and head into the mortar pit, which is just outside the door of your hooch. And that's where I spent the night. But you know, I knew they hit the airfield, and I could hear the shrapnel pinging on the petroleum tanks, the JP4 and all. And I was expecting an explosion any moment, but and I could smell the I don't know what the hell is in a Katusha, but to me I'd call it cordite or sulfur, you know, of huge explosions. But they did. Not only they put quite a couple of rounds right into the airfield, but the biggest damage that night was they managed to hit the Marine ammunition dump. It was 2 clicks south of our location, and it blew all through the night and all through the next several days. You know, it took days for all the rounds to cook off. This one here is from the top of a bolted storage steel tank, and it's looking at the Marine Air Group across the road where the helicopter is taking off. And the mountains and the hills behind, that's where the NVAs shot, you know, set up their Katyushas. After that January, there were subsequent attacks in April and May, all the way until I left. And that's one of the main reasons I didn't re-up and extend. You know, I knew that I was lucky to get out of there the first time. I had a 2-year obligation after I got my commission. I came home as a first lieutenant. There's a picture of me getting my promotion from the up in Chu Lai. When I got discharged in Fort Sheridan, a lot of the guys who stayed in, we were offered a duty station anywhere in the world. I would have been promoted to captain. I said, well, I'll tell you what, send me to chaplain school, give me the captain bars, then I could be captain, chaplain, Kaplan, and I'll stay in. No, that didn't happen. I said, I'll take my honorable discharge now, thank you very much. You know, it was quite obvious that the Vietnam War to us was a war against communism. To the Vietnamese people, it was a war of nationalism. They wanted to be one nation more than they didn't. And the people we were supporting in the South, even though they were, you know, loyal to America and faithful to us, they were very corrupt, and they worked for their own interests, and they didn't fight as hard as they could have fought. Now that we have the benefit of hindsight, we can see all these issues perfectly. I always told myself during the war year that I'd love to come back and see it again as a civilian. It was 2014, and the situation changed quickly in Vietnam, and it became a burgeoning, energetic, young country recovering from the war. And I saw this going on, and I said, hey, I'm 70 now. You know, by 2014, quite a few American GIs had been back, and I was hearing good things. So I said, I want to turn 70 there. And I stood on that beach in Chu Lai and thanked my lucky stars that I got out of there alive. And I got to show my wife all the different places that, you know, I took her to Saigon, Cam Ranh, Dalat. I'm kind of a student of the war and the both before and after. And I decided I'm going to do one for myself. And I knew some of my buddies had been there a year ago with the same tour company, and they did the trip from Hanoi to Saigon on dirt bikes. So I decided they were going to do another 18 days in Vietnam, 12 days dirt bike riding, arriving in Hanoi and leaving from Hanoi. We all got on our motorbikes and we took off for the countryside. And we were in a different town every night. Most of the rides were 100, 125 miles a day. And I was the only war veteran, and I was 9 years older than the next oldest guy. So they treated me like a legend. It was wonderful. But we were all friends, you know, every night, you know, hi, bye, bow, you know, knocking down shots and having a party. And I came back black and blue and worn out and tired, but so proud that I did it and pulled it off. When we got out, we were just said, here's your final pay, and here's your papers, goodbye, you know, and that was it. Yeah, no thanks, no welcome, no nothing. So, but it's been made. I don't resent it, and I don't hold it against them. But and it's been made up to me over and over again. I mean, this last honor flight was almost as cathartic as when I went back to see all my old duty stations. I had seen the wall on a couple years prior, so I had seen it before, but seeing it with my fellow vets, and there's a couple of Kaplans on the wall too, and same age, they were both in country same time I was there. So wow. It was very sobering, yeah. I was witness to some of the monumental events of our time, and I started thinking more deeply about how it affected me and the respect I had for the people that I was there with. And then when I was mustered out of the Army, they said, oh, well, you have a 10% hearing loss, and I was introduced to the VA, but I did nothing with it until it was just about 8 or 9 years ago that I got fully involved with volunteering for the VA, and then I became part of a group, and then I was rated again with a 40% disability, and then they finally diagnosed, first they called it anxiety disorder, then they elevated it up to PTSD. So, you know, I got fully involved with other veterans, and even though politically we're all very different, as any cross-section of America is going to be, but we all support each other and know that we have special issues psychologically and that others will never have because they weren't there and didn't experience what we did. So we have a common bond that keeps us together that I find. Just as, you know, I like to play baseball, I always like to be part of a team. With your VA, you know, I'm finding the camaraderie among other soldiers. And that's one of the main reasons I want to do this interview, because I want to encourage anybody who should happen to see this, if I'm lucky enough, please don't hold back, get involved with your VA. Make them give you what you've earned. You know, even if you don't think you deserve it, you do. And it's not like taking anything away from anybody else, because, you know, the Veterans Administration has one of the biggest budgets in Washington. If they don't use it up, they won't get it back. And, you know, you have to ask for what you've earned. And don't feel bad about it, because believe me, whether you're hurting or suffering from Agent Orange or not, it doesn't matter. You're psychologically scarred and you need the help.